Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Dorl with National Association of Flight Instructors, and tonight we've got a special briefing room for you. We got a couple of friends here and some rotary wing experts. Like I said, I'm Tom Dorl. I fly helicopters in the Air Force, and now I do light fixed wing instruction. And I've got some guests here. We're going to talk about some rotary wing flight characteristics and how those translate over to fixed wing, and just talk about helicopters and share some insights for some folks who've been out in the industry. So Ned, if you could introduce yourself, and then we'll go around the room here and then we'll get started.
Sure. Ned Parks, Akron, Ohio. Started flying helicopters in the Army back in the mid 80s. Was a flight instructor in the Army, and then I was a 141 chief pilot of a school in Columbus, Ohio, and we did just about everything down there. And then I flew EMS for a couple of different programs, and now I just do some flight instruction in some couple of Enstроms and some Bell 47s and a couple of Jet Rangers.
Fantastic. Mick, how about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Mick Harper. I'm out here in Monument, Colorado. Currently a check airman and training captain for Air Methods, and I fly the EC-130 and the AS-350, trying to teach folks how to do air ambulance operations and prep them to go out in the field. Previous to that, which might be interesting, I did fixed wing instruction for DOS, teaching Marines and airmen how to fly fixed wing aircraft prior to going to undergraduate pilot training and jumping into a T6 Texan 2. So a little bit of a crossover fixed wing to rotary wing from there. Other than that, I was in the Air Force for a long time.
And you flew helicopters, right?
I did.
I'm going to pull it out of you so you can fly in the Air Force, Mick.
Say again?
What did you fly in the Air Force?
I was a Pavok driver and Bell 212s and NAN Model Hueys as well.
All right, fantastic. So lots of rotary wing experience. And Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, Chris Anderson, Janesville, Wisconsin. Primarily a corporate pilot these days, flying a Challenger 605 and a Hawker 800. But my big side hobby is flying and teaching in helicopters. Been flying. I've owned several Bell 47s, so if we want to get into a 47 conversation, we'll have a great time there. Currently have a Bell 47 G2, and I still do a lot of instruction in the Robinsons, the Enstroms, some Bell 206. I'm very involved with the Bell 47 operation that you see up at AirVenture every year. With we've got 4 Bell 47s and 1 R44 and 12 pilots that fly overhead for 7-8 days for 8 to 9 hours a day. But that's most of my stuff these days.
That's cool.
Okay. No, that sounds great. Right? So I think we got a great diversity of experience and some wonderful guests here. So the Bell 47, that's for some folks that may not realize, right? Is that the MASH helicopter?
It's the MASH helicopter. It's the first commercially certified helicopter in the U.S. for all practical purposes. So it's, yep, the beginning of MASH. You see the Bell 47. I believe that's a D or a D1 in there with the Franklin engine and the tanks in there, but that's what they use. And incidentally, if anybody is that particular helicopter on MASH is up for sale right now.
I saw that.
You can actually see the history on it if you want to go look at it. It's a little out of my budget, but it's out there. It's very out there.
That's really cool. All right. Well, hopefully we'll circle back to that because I think Ned and I were talking, previously in the week about this, and we could probably talk for hours. And when you get certainly four pilots together, let alone 4 helicopter pilots, you never know what's going to happen. So we'll get going. So with all that experience that, so we've all got fixed wing, right? We've all got. So let's just kick right off. What, as you see helicopter pilots or fixed wing go to helicopter, what kind of skills translation do you see that works out really well when you teach or when you have an applicant? Or what are some of the skills that some rotary wing folks may need to work on? And Ned, I'll just throw it out there. And Ned, I'm just going to pick on you first.
No, that's fine. I've got a transition student right now. He's a private pilot with, 600 or 800 hours, and he's got his own Bell 47, and I'm getting a crossover certificate right now working with him. And I've done a ton of those over the years. I think the big thing is that typical not standard aeronautical knowledge stuff and typical airmanship is a direct translation. You know, they understand an airport, they understand a heading, they understand that sort of thing. Where they get tripped up a little bit, come in this direction, is they don't understand the speed at which things go bad. And that's where you got to speed up their brain a little bit. And there's no time for a checklist. If you don't know what to do right away, you're in trouble. So I find that getting them to speed up the game, if you will, is probably the biggest thing, is a problem for them, come in that direction. It's not that they can't do it. Obviously they can, but that to me, that's the thing I always find a little bit.
So Ned, do you see, you know, when I was in the Air Force, we would give check rides, and I think, you know, obviously the FAA kind of looks at this, we would look at, you know, broad categories, which are somewhat, you know, pass fail, safety, judgment, airmanship, things like that. Do you see that, you know, that they have that skill set when they come over, or when they go to?
If they've been well trained, yeah. If they have it in the fixed wing, they'll have it in the rotorcraft. It's trying to understand the unique application and where we fly and how we fly and why we do it. This fella I'm working with right now, he said, could we just work on the helicopter doing everything at the airport that doesn't not include the runway? I don't know what to do. So I worked with him, and then I called one of the local towers and I said, hey, if I bring a guy down there, can you work with us? He goes, absolutely. We'll give him everything that doesn't include a runway. I'll throw everything at the, awesome. That's what I need to do. And they're not a busy control tower at airport. So they say, yeah, we'd love to have you, and we'll give you the run of the place. So good for him for understanding that he needed to do that.
Hey, Mick, I'll throw the same kind of scenario question for you. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, you know, the majority of the guys that I'm teaching right now are pretty highly experienced rotary wing folks. But if I was to think about it, and to pile on to what Ned's saying, is, you know, like he said, the airmanship, air sense, you know, airspace knowledge, that all translates over. It's once you get below 60 knots, right? Things start to get a little different. And I'll pile on to what Ned was saying is, you know, once you lift this thing off the dolly, you're flying. There's no time to warm up as you taxi through a non-movement area, get clearance onto taxiway alpha, and get down to the hold short line. There's, you know, as you start to prepare your brain, once you lift, you're flying. And you need to be aware of everything that can go wrong. Some special interest items that the FAA is putting on us, you know, dynamic rollover, brownout, whiteout, flat light conditions, those kinds of things. And all that kind of stuff can happen as soon as you pull pitch to hover taxi to your takeoff spot. So those are probably some of the big issues that need to be worked right away as somebody is, you know, transitioning from fixed wing to rotary wing, to understand that you need to be on your game as soon as you pull pitch, because that's when things can get a little silly if you're not careful and you're not thinking about what's happening out there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So Chris, you know, one thing I always remember starting helicopters, certainly in the Huey, don't have a lot of time, but in the Blackhawk, you know, as soon as we start engine number one, obviously it starts to get a little unbalanced, and then it'll find its momentum. What do you find similar things that Mick had mentioned about, you know, as soon as you lift off, you're flying, so your attention to detail, your game face has to come on faster. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I do. And I'll back up a little bit. I get this question a lot since I do, as a pilot examiner, both airplanes and helicopters. And as soon as an airplane guy sees finds out I do helicopters, they're always asking questions. And they says, does any of this stuff that I've learned here in the airplane transition to the helicopter? The fundamental knowledge does. But when I'm picking up a new student who is coming from the airplane world, I tell them, forget everything you know about flying an airplane for a minute. This is something new. It's a new feel. It's a new reaction. And that's where the difference is. So you can read a book on how to fly a helicopter. You can read a book on how to fly an airplane. Airplane, you're maybe a little bit more successful at getting the airplane up off the ground and back on. Helicopter, not so much. You can read the book, but you still won't have the touch and the feel of doing that. And some of the things that I see from airplane coming into the helicopters, some things don't transition well. For example, low G or negative G and the responses to it. There's some bad habits that we have, and they're good habits in an airplane that don't transition to a helicopter. And for example, that negative G is one of them, that kind of thing. Pedal work is different, and just adjusting to the feel of the aircraft. But, once we start up, like you say, getting that transition, thinking as soon as something's starting or turning to spin, we're flying, we're actively involved into the game, right then and there. There's, he made a valid point. You don't have the time to taxi out and, make little mistakes in an airplane, where a little mistake in a helicopter in the same transition is an entirely different game.
Mick, that's a great point. I hadn't, because, where I fly from, and most people, 5-minute taxi or 0.1 or 0.2 to get there. So you kind of have your time to taxi, do your taxi check. And yeah, with the helicopter, I mean, you're, like you said, on a dolly, and it's go time right there. So let me, let me throw another one out there. In terms of translating the skills from like a 180 to like a turning auto rotation, or a steep approach to like a short field. Chris, I'll kind of pose this one to you. Do you see that skill set and that kind of awareness of what's going on, what the aircraft is doing, what the environment's doing, and then how that pilot can react? Do you see those skills in the rotary wing pilot these days?
I don't see them from the transition from the airplane to the helicopter. I mean, for example, most of the steep approaches and is combined with confined area or off airport operation, where an airplane is strictly that, stay into an airport, whether it be grass field or otherwise. The ideas are very, similar as far as energy management, but the manipulation of the controls and, for example, on a steep approach, feeling for that ETL as you're riding down on a steep approach, there isn't that in an airplane. You're still dealing with, pitch and power, and cyclic and collective. There's some energy management principles that are very similar, but really the control manipulation isn't exactly the same from that aspect of it. The autos, if we have a commercial airplane pilot coming to the commercial helicopter, or even a private helicopter, the 180 autos, the interesting thing I've seen with people is that if they're good doing their 180s in the helicopter, they really get good at their 180 in the airplane. So, and I think that sight picture judgment that they see in the helicopter, where the touchdown point or the aim point is moving up the windshield or down the windshield, really sets home much better in the helicopter than a lot of people do in the airplane. So I see that there, but otherwise not so much. You don't see a huge correlation, or people aren't making that correlation between the two, airplane versus helicopter type of thing.
Okay, Mick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, it all depends, okay. Yeah, I think there are translation skills. I'm going to come at it from a different perspective, in the fact that where I work now, flying turbines, and this may or may not be true, so take that for what it's worth, but there is a tendency to not rely so much on auto rotations, even in a single engine helicopter, because quote unquote turbines don't fail. Well, they do every now and again, and it's still a valuable skill set. But to your point, and then some of that could also be the operator and what risk the operator is willing to take as far as their instruction. I digress. So to your point, though, I would say what I have found is, I think with respect to confined area work and remote operations in a helicopter, that translates actually back to fixed wing, because the wind awareness, the elevation, the temperature, what is the density, altitude, those kinds of things that are very important flying a helicopter off airport or to a confined area. All of a sudden back now, when I'm flying up to, Vail, right, or Eagle, in a fixed wing Cessna 172, I realize that the DA today is 12,000 feet, and the winds are probably pretty darn important. So it does go back that way, and that's kind of what I'll talk to as far as the translation is. Flying rotary wing and learning how to fly rotary wing off airport can only enhance your ability to understand your environment that you're flying in.
Okay. Ned, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, two things specifically, as Chris was talking about winds. I find that my fixed wing students can't figure out the winds if they don't hear it or see a sock. And my helicopter students can look at a wave, they look at treetops, they look at smoke, they look at it because we don't have that in 90% of the environment we're in. So I'm always trying to teach that to the fixed wing side is whether they're coming over to helicopters or I'm doing fixed wing instruction is, you're on a cross country. What are your winds doing to you? Well, I don't know. I got to look at my GPS. Well, let's look down at the ground. There's all these cues. Let's have a look at them. So that's something I find interesting. The other thing, Tom, that I guess I'm just completely an idiot about this, and that's power management. Way more than a helicopter and way more in a piston helicopter than a turbine helicopter. And that's because, you're controlling the RPM and you can get the rotor low and all these things can go wrong. And I've got an interesting situation. This fellow that I'm working with, and another fellow I worked with, they flew with an helicopter instructor who had started his career in the military, has never flown a piston helicopter in his life. So I'm getting in there going, why are you letting your rotor RPM get down? And he's going, I don't even know what you're talking about. Well, the other instructor doesn't either, because they've flown in a turbine, you wind it up and you go. It's yeah, right. It's just all good. So power management, I think, is another issue that I'm just crazy about. I spent too much time going to offshore oil rigs, hospital helipads, everything else, and you can't ask for the power at the end of those maneuvers. If you don't have it collected up before you get there, it's too late. And so I think power management is huge, that a fixed wing guy sets it and just goes, I got 3,000 feet of runway and I'll get there, and it'll be a little longer, be a little short, but I'll get there. Right.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And Chris, when you give as a DPE, when you examine an applicant, do you see kind of those similar things with power management? What are some?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see a lot in the power management. And, like you mentioned, I'm doing most of that Bell 47 stuff up at EAA. So we're dealing with piston powered helicopters on hot days. Power management, energy management is a huge issue. We talk about it every year at our recurrent training. We have a wide variety of helicopter pilots that get it. They're all good group, and we haven't had any issues in years. But anyway, it's on a check ride and a teaching perspective. I can tell the difference. For example, a good 47 pilot and how they manipulate their throttle in the collective is outstanding. If I see it going from one way or to the other, there's issues involved. And we do the same thing. Like he was saying with his other Bell 47 student and the instructor that had no piston helicopter time. It sticks out like a sore thumb. And we'll see that in the first probably as soon as the helicopter lifts off. Mm-hmm. They'll pull it into the air, or rather than getting it light on the skids and watching the RPM making a throttle or collective adjustment as the helicopter comes off the ground. We'll see it right then and there how they manipulate that stuff. The majority of check rides I end up doing these days are in Robinson products, and with the governor there, a lot of that stuff gets masked until either we're doing, a governor failure or something like that. And we'll do something like turn the governor off and do a steep approach or a shallow approach and running landing, and watch how they handle the RPM changes, as they fly the pattern, as they make the approach and even the touchdown, and see how well they manage it. You can tell the good ones.
What I'm thinking about in the fixed wing applications, when I take someone who's, never flown a complex airplane, and now they've got to manipulate a prop, and what's coming in my head, or what I think of, is that I was taught slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And because you can jam that prop forward, the airplane does whatever it does, and it's completely different in a multi, certainly when you're dragging the throttles and stuff like that. So those are really good point outs. So now shifting focus, kind of taking from VFR into IFR, what about, inadvertent IMC? Because not every helicopter pilot is going to be instrument rated. Not every helicopter pilot is going to have been into a class or in an instrument situation. What are some of your thoughts? Mick, I'll start with you about inadvertent IMC or just instrument. What are some of your thoughts with helicopter pilots?
So So in my industry that I work in, you have to have an instrument ticket. And, but both helicopters that I fly and teach on are not certified for instrument flight. Right. So you have to have the instrument ticket, but that doesn't mean, so there's a difference between currency and proficiency. What I have found is that a couple of things. If one of our pilots has fixed wing background, they're probably a pretty good instrument pilot because they've probably been in the clouds. Most of our pure helicopter pilots have very little actual IMC time. They have very little actual, I've just lost my peripheral vision. One peak's worth 1,000 cross checks, right? So there, and the other thing is, depends upon the kind of helicopter they did their instrument training in. I've had some pilots come to me and say, well, I just rely on the VSI. Okay, I understand it because the attitude indicator in the helicopter that they trained in was worthless. But that does not take away the fact that instrument flying is still pitch and power, pitch and power, pitch and power. Set your power, get your trim right, and then everything's on the attitude indicator, and then let the performance instruments tell you what you're doing right or wrong, and then you correct from there. So what I think has been, two things there. What I think is invaluable, if you're thinking about inadvertent IMC from a helicopter, because most helicopters out there are VFR operations, but you're concerned about instrument work, go jump on a fixed wing because it's reasonably priced. And frankly, you'll be able to actually get in the clouds and get that feeling of what the giant hand feels like, what the lanes feel like, and actually know I have to trust my instruments. And number two, don't ever go in the clouds. I try to teach my guys and gals that I fly with, they're all really great, in my opinion, stick and rudder pilots for the most part. But when you get them into the clouds, they get a little nervous. And that's more of just not comfortable than it is it's probably a confidence issue more than anything. So let's get them in the clouds. And we can do that in the simulators that I teach in now, which is a good thing. But I tell them, hey, I want you to have a healthy respect for the IMC condition, the fact that these helicopters we're flying do not belong in the clouds. But if you find yourself there, I want you to have the confidence to be able to fly the aircraft and bring it back home safely via the nearest suitable approach. And I think that's kind of the goal that I'm going for. So the takeaway is, if you're concerned about flying inadvertent IMC, IFR in a helicopter, frankly, go get some time in a fixed wing and get yourself in the clouds would be my takeaway.
Awesome. Ned, I know you instruct, I know we talked about your instrument ticket and stuff like that. You're flying both very actively. What are some of your thoughts on that, or just IFR instrument flying in helicopters?
Well, I'm pretty hardcore about inadvertent IMC in a helicopter is the most unforgivable sin in the world. We can set down anywhere. We can slow down to ridiculously. Why? It's just, if you do it, you should be slapped. I mean, it's bad enough in a fixed wing, but at least, in a fixed wing, I get it, right? You're stuck up there, you're doing 60 or 50, or you're stalling, you're terrified. I get it, right? A helicopter, to me, it's the unforgivable sin. There's absolutely zero excuse for going IMC in a helicopter, unannounced. I mean, inadvertently. It just should never happen. So I'm really adamant about that. I just jump up and down and I beat and I flew with a guy in the Army, and I'll never forget, we were in some pretty nasty weather, and he taught me a great thing that has rung in my head ever since. Slow down, don't outrun your visibility. And I've never forgot that little lesson. If we don't outrun our visibility, and we don't have to from a speed standpoint, then we shouldn't do it. And as far as what Mick just said about, go out there and get some actual time in a fixed wing, these operations that get all, well, your time in a fixed wing doesn't count, or your time in a helicopter doesn't count. And it's like, get over yourself. You don't impress me. Of course it counts, right? It all counts. We all learn something from it, for sure. And Mick, you made a good point. Today, for $60 an hour, we can go to our local FBO and get an FAA approved really nice simulator somewhere and go play around in that and see what it's like. Turn all the lights out and force yourself into it. I was in a simulator today and put Cat 1 in there in a 172 and made myself squirm all the way to the runway. And I mean, I was like, oh, but it really, it is a way to expose ourselves to those things, and we should be doing that. I don't care what airframe the simulator is. That for that experience, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care if it's fixed wing or rotor wing. It just doesn't matter. But shame on the guy that goes invert and IMC in a helicopter.
That's a great point. And you know, Mick and I both had assignments over in Iceland. And you know, the helicopter we used to fly had anti-ice almost but to a certain limit, and we learned to respect the weather. And then, you know, back then there wasn't ForeFlight. You know, I don't even think aviationweather.gov or stuff like that. We didn't have that up there. We had TV cameras up in every building to look at the weather and all that stuff, and it taught us a healthy respect for not only icing but ceiling, visibility, and certainly winds. And you know, where I teach, we've got a rotor to rotor transition course, and we got a lot of helicopter bases in Virginia, you know, where I live. And it's interesting. We had one student who's flying with a friend of mine. He's a 53 pilot, so you know, he's flying a gigantic helicopter, Echo. So I think it's got 3 engines. It's the mine towing one, or the mine sweepers rather. And winds for him, I think it was like the winds at the airport were, I think, 15 gust 25, 10 degrees off. You know, and the young instructor's like, oh, that's, and I'm looking at I'm just sitting in the back kind of watching. I was doing some paperwork, and I'm just watching this conversation go down, and the helicopter pilot's like, not a big deal. And I'm just watching it, and I'm like, not a big deal in I don't know what a 53 grosses out at, but maybe 50, 60,000. I said, you can just turn. I said, this is a 2,400 pound aluminum fixed wing aircraft that lands at 55 or 60 knots. I said, that's kind of a big. So I just thought it was an interesting conversation. Okay, so what do you think about, or what are some thoughts about, you know, in fixed wing, I see a lot of electronic flight bags and iPads and digital cockpits. Do you see what do you see in the helicopter world? Kind of the same activity towards that, or because helicopters obviously fly, you know, in a little bit of a different regime, do you see that kind of activity and action and usage of electronic flight bags and, you know, iPads and stuff like that? I'll just throw that one out there. That's just a free question anyway.
I'll jump at it. I'll bite. So here's mine, right? Here's my iPad that I take with me, I have to carry with me, and I've got my complete flight and my ForeFlight and all that sort of thing, and it's fantastic. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, I've got, depending on the bird I fly, I've got 2 430s plus a GMX 200, or I've got a 650, 750 plus a G500H. I almost have too much information. And as I enter maturity, and my beard whitens up, yeah, I got it, man, but you still got to know how to read a map. And I defer back to Ned, and I go, you still got to look out and go, what are the winds doing? You still got to look out and see, you know, look at the clouds and go, oh, those are lenticular clouds. What do they mean, right? Well, that's mountain wave, dude. Hey, maybe not a good day to press west. Those kinds of things. I think there's all kinds of great information from an electronic flight bag. But it's an interesting feed to follow when you jump on Facebook or Bookface or Sixpack or whatever, and you go to the ForeFlight users and you look at all the questions they're asking, half of which I don't even understand, but they're good questions. But man, I don't need to tape every single flight. Personally, you know, I'm not worried about all my trouble. I'm worried about, let's go back to what Chris was talking about. Do I have the power and the power management to go do what I want to go do, to go where I want to go? What's the density, altitude? Do I have the gas? I mean, some real basics. So there's a different level, right? And then I'll get off the stage here, but you know, we got to start out. We still need the stick and rotor basics. What's a good helicopter pilot? All right, you're there. Now we can press and start looking at the cool tools that are available to us.
Chris, as an examiner, what do you see as planned cross country flights? They, you know, I kind of grew up on paper, and now I'm kind of splitting the difference with iPads because I'm always fail or I'm going to something on it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I see more people, especially the newer pilots, getting into the iPads and the all the stuff, you know, whether it be a 430 or whatever's in their helicopter these days. And the interesting part, I just signed off. Well, I guess it's been a year ago now that I signed off a private pilot helicopter, and we started with paper. and then we transitioned into the iPad. So we had a understanding of what was going on and what needed to be done, and wing correction angles and variation and deviation, where hey, ForeFlight takes care of a lot of that for you, and now it became an issue of how do we manage these devices in the aircraft. So and that's an interesting part too, because I'll have guys, they'll get the suction cup iPad holder, stuck right up here right in their face. And I'm like, that's not the place for it. So, learning how to actually cockpit management and then the management of the device themselves are really what needs to be set up. And a good instructor can help them do that rather than just say, oh, that's great, let's go use it. Or, worse yet, I don't know anything about that device over there. You take care of it, and there's no guidance on it. So when I see an applicant coming for a check ride, they're fumbling through stuff because they don't really have a flow or SOP for handling their the advanced cockpit technology, whether it be an iPad or a Garmin product in the helicopter. So that's probably the biggest thing. Knowing the basics first, taking it into the advanced stuff, and then managing that resource.
Yeah, and making sure that whatever automation, whether it's a G1000, Avidyne, or whatever FMS you have, whatever that presentation is, it's garbage in, garbage out, and you got to make sure that presentation makes sense. Ned, what do you see in some of your instructions?
So yeah, I'm fully into the tech. I'm fine with it. I don't believe in walking backwards. I just made this argument the other day to somebody. Well, then take the GPS out of your airplane, and why do you have that fuel management electronic thing? Take that out. And I was having a conversation with an examiner who refuses to let people use them, which just aggravates the living what right out of me at a level you can't even believe. And here's my argument to that. My argument is, okay, fine. He proved to you can do it on paper because you wouldn't let him even touch the iPad. He buys one tomorrow and goes out and kills himself because nobody's touched it. He's not had to Chris's point, he's not had instruction from anybody to do anything. And now we don't have any control over him anymore. Right? So that that really bothers me. I learned, and this has been kind of recent for me, Tom. I'm treating now, whether it's an avionics that's bolted to the aircraft or it's in my hand, iPad, to me, I'm treating it like it's another aircraft system, and I have to learn it as well as the fuel system. Now, there's a limit to that. There may be things it does I don't need, fine, then I'm not going to learn that. But whatever I'm going to use, I need to understand it really well.
No, that's a good point, because what I see in some of my students, both if they're, helicopter coming or fixed wing or just fixed wing, is they got their iPad and they're trying to program whatever product we have on the panel. And I said, well, what happens when those don't match up, or you get distracted, or whatever. And they look here, and they're not all of them are children of the magenta line, but they and I can see it when they're in the clouds or when they're in the foggles and they're flying like this. I'm like, the inverted V and the 6-pack, I don't care if it's on a digital or not. And so just stay in your little area. So it's very interesting. But so do your students respond to that, Ned, when you say have mastery of that system, just like you would fuel or electronic?
Yeah, and to me, I don't care if it's a paper map or an electronic map. I still have to know how to read it. Right? So I need to know what that little blue thing that looks like this is. I don't care if it's electronically imaged to me or comes off a paper. I still have to know what that is, right? And I have to know what that little funny weird thing is. It's blue. That's a lake. Hello. I don't care how I absorb it. Doesn't matter to me. I still have to know what the symbols mean. I have to know how to navigate. And so to me, I go, why are we having this argument, right? It doesn't matter. It's to Mick's point, a ton of information, but let's spend some time managing the information and know how to use it. And let's make sure that we allow that information, know it well enough, we allow it to keep ourselves out of trouble, right? And it can be really helpful, really helpful.
Well, it's a tool, just like everything. All right, so as we get ready to wrap up, and you guys are in the industry, you're teaching, you got thousands of hours of rotary wing and fixed wing experience. So I'm going to start with Ned. Ned, if you were a young or a recurring rotary wing pilot watching us tonight, in 30 seconds or a minute, what advice would you give the pilot?
Run. What? Run. Go fixed wing. What, are you crazy? No, I'm joking. You know, I can tell you, I think that there's no finer feeling in the world that when you find the hover button. And I'll never forget when I found mine as a student in the Army, is like, oh my God, it's there. There's no finer feeling for the instructor. When I find more satisfaction when my student finds a hover button than when I teach a student to grease a 172. That's like, yeah, whatever. Just hold it there and you'll get it, right? Just stop moving and it'll grease on. You can't do that with the hover, right? You got to be working it, right? So it's like, oh shit, it's great. So I would tell people, if nothing else, go get 10 hours. Go get enough instruction to where you hover. I don't care if you ever solo. I think it'll make you a better pilot, of course, but I think we should step across all boundaries. I mean, my goal this year, it's a rating a year for me. This year's gliders, right? So I don't care what the rating is. Go get a rating a year. Doesn't matter to me what it is. So go solo a helicopter and don't even worry about it. Never go see Chris for the rating if you don't want to do that or you don't have it in your budget. But just get the experience, right? Just go get the experience, whatever your budget will allow.
All right, I love it. Mick, over to you.
Yeah, so I would just say a couple of things, right? And I'll look at it from a different perspective than Ned, which I actually really appreciated those comments. But if you're gonna be in the helicopter industry and your goal is that, be humble and be wary of complacency. And what I mean by that is I get all kinds of pilots that come into the air ambulance business, and the air ambulance is just one aspect of the business. Utility pilots usually can take a lot of curveballs, and that's really neat to watch them be able to just flex left and right and do what they want. Military pilots, and I'm one of them, sometimes we have trouble checking our ego at the door, and we need to do that. Tour pilots sometimes need a little bit more broadening. So what I'm saying is don't get stuck in the paradigm of this is what I do and I'm a good pilot. In other words, go ahead, if you're just going from point A to point B every single day, man, you maybe need to go do some hover work, man. Maybe you need to go jump in the sim and I need to put you at a 75-foot hover over a helipad and see if that height velocity chart truly is correct. And we can do that in the sim so that you can build those skills out such that you at least regain currency, but become proficient in those skill sets that you're not accomplishing. Because I think, frankly, a helicopter pilot's got a little bit more broad skill set, and that doesn't mean good or bad, just available options to them from the job that you do with the machine.
Awesome. Chris, how about you?
Flying's basically a gift. I enjoy it no matter what I'm flying, airplane, helicopter, or the glider. I love doing gliders or gyrocopters. It truly is. And a lot of people ask me, which do I enjoy more? And to be honest, it's whatever I'm doing at the time. I find value in that. And to emphasize what the other guys are doing, talking about their, number one, go and do it. Get out there, get a little bit of experience. The bite hits hard and it hits quick. But the other thing to realize is that helicopter flying gives us probably more freedom in the air than any other type of flying. We can take off and land almost anywhere. We can go fast. We can go slow. We can do a billion things in our job description if we work it out into a career. But with that freedom also becomes responsibilities. So we have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but to the industry and to the passengers, to anybody even just standing on the ground. And we need to take that part of it seriously. Otherwise, we're going to have other issues down the road, from noise complaints to accidents and anything in between. So, the freedom's there. Just be responsible and have a great time doing it.
Yeah, no, I think that those are all great inputs. And one thing I tell my students, all fixed wing now, is I said, once you get your ticket, right, it's up to you to maintain currency and proficiency. We got all that. But I said, build yourself a personal proficiency plan. I said, there's only 90 days, right, for a fixed wing, for takeoffs and landings. That's just to carry passengers and at night, and we know full stops and all that stuff. I said, but there's no currency for power off 180, for steep approach, for short approach, all this stuff. I said, build that plan. I said, if you need help building something, I'll help you build it, because and keep those skills sharp. And I try and teach them, what's the weakest area you have, and it might be for helicopter slope landings or power off 180s or something like that, and then work on that. Find an instructor, find an affinity club. There's IMC clubs. There's all sorts of, NAFI's got a great professional development program. There's a plug for that, John Niehaus, and they got great opportunities. And Ned, I really like. I'm going to steal your rating a year to cash in now for Christmas. I don't know what I'm going to get, but I'll come up with something.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Maybe I'll come see Chris and get my helicopter, my Robinson 10 hours, and get checked out in the Robbie.
There you go. It'll be a lot of fun.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for joining us here, folks. And, thanks for all your experience and your time. And we look forward to seeing you on the next briefing room.